Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, first of all, thanks a lot for Atlassian for hosting. And we're big fans of Bitbucket and HipChat, use them every day, and they make great products for product teams. And also thanks a lot for all things in product management for having us. To give a bit of a context who we are a small company originally from Vienna, Austria. My two co-founders, Mick and Alan, are with me. I'm the CEO of the company called Blossom. We previously have been doing a lot of stuff. We've been contributing to the jQuery framework. We've built some high-traffic Facebook applications, actually one of the highest traffic Facebook applications in the European market for the FIFA Soccer World Cup, for Red Bull and for Jim Beam and some other brands. And right now we're working on a project management tool for product teams. And actually I don't want to go that much into our product. It's just to give you some context. It's basically in a similar space like Greenhopper by Atlassian, Agile Zen by Rally Dev, and Pivotal Tracker from Pivotal Labs. That's our product space. We do software for product teams. But what I wanted to talk about today was the biggest lesson that we as a team and I personally learned over the last few years, and that's a lesson about the product space in general and how the product space is changing and what the implications are for product managers and tech guys and marketing guys and designers and basically everyone who's working on products. And that's a lesson that really scared me, and fortunately I'm not too scared about it anymore. But it will be kind of a long story arc to get there. So I want to give you a bit of a context on what we've been doing the last few months. So we started out with actually not building a product management tool. We started out with building a bug tracking system because our background is in engineering, and we've been using a lot of issue tracking, bug tracking software for the products we've built, and we never really felt comfortable using them because the standard view that we had coming to work in the morning was a list of priorities in shades of red, from very urgent to very, very important to critical, and I still don't know whether urgent or critical is more important. But the tool had different shades of red, so that made it a bit more easy. So that was like the initial spark that made us realize that we are actually engineers and we can build our own product. And the first thing that will be in the product is no priorities. But that was only the starting point. And the interesting thing for us was that we got into an accelerator program in Europe called Seedcamp, which is basically the European equivalent to Y Combinator. And from that on, we've been on a very interesting journey through Eastern Europe. We're originally from Vienna, from Austria, Central Europe. Seedcamp took us to London, which is basically one of the hubs in the European startup scene. And thanks to Seedcamp, we've made a US tour earlier this year, starting in New York, going to Boston, from Boston to San Francisco, from San Francisco to Seattle. We've been to the Valley. We've been the tour ended in South by Southwest, and during that time, we as engineers felt a bit uncomfortable, or engineers, product guys felt a bit uncomfortable that we can't work on our product all the time. So we want to work on a product, but we have to pitch all the time. We have to articulate what we're doing. We have to think about the market. These were all things that we're not really comfortable with. So we've been living outside of our comfort zone for several weeks. And during that time, we've met teams, product teams, and companies in Eastern Europe, in Central Europe, in the UK, in the East Coast, and in the West Coast in the US. And as you can imagine, it's not only a geographical journey, it's also a time journey. If you're looking at how people work and how they create products and what the pace is they're going at. And that was really fortunate to us to visit that many places in that short time frame, because it forced us to not think about our own product. It forced us to think about the whole product space. And like the day-to-day that you can imagine that we had touring the US was 4 to 5 meetings every single day, and events on the evening and on the weekend. So we had basically 2 months where we've been talking to investors like Andreessen Horowitz, Index Ventures, all very interesting investors, also interesting companies like Tumblr, like Fogbox, like Facebook, Google, Amazon, Qualcomm. So we've seen a lot of different product spaces, different investors, different points of views, and suddenly it clicked for me personally. And the time when it clicked was when I saw a talk by Jack Dorsey at TechCrunch Disrupt, and he quoted a guy called William Gibson, who is a science fiction author, and he coined the term cyberspace. And the quote was, "The future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed." And hearing that sentence, the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed, and thinking about it made me realize that right now we are in San Francisco and we are in the Bay Area, and made me realize that this actually is the place where the future of product development is. And everything made sense from that point of view for me. The reason why investors or product teams didn't get our product in Europe as much as startups in the Bay Area understand the product and want to learn more about it. So on the one extreme, we had to push our product and explain our product, whereas in the other extreme, people pulled the product from us. And it's the same people, they're working in the same space, they're as smart, they're as capable, but they live in a different time zone. That's what I was thinking about. And then another input that I got in a very short period of time was I listened to a Bob Dylan song, and it's the song "Times Are A-Changing," and it's I would say the William Gibson quote has an interesting positive note and like an epiphanic tone, whereas the Bob Dylan song is quite dramatic, and he talks about water that's rising, and either you learn to swim or you sink, basically. And then there's another article I read in a very short time frame, different context, by Eric Ries about product development, and the title was "Winter is Coming," so a reference to Game of Thrones. And just having these inputs in a very short time frame made me realize that we in the product space are actually in a time that's dramatically changing. There are trends in the direction of shorter release cycles, shipping sooner, and it has implications for many, many different areas. And just realizing that made me really, really scared. And I literally couldn't sleep at night. I was awake because I realized I'm in the product space, I'm a product guy, and I'm actually working on a product that should help other product people. So I was really scared, just realizing that. It's like when you have an intuition about, or a gut feeling about that something is changing all the time, and you only realize it on a day-to-day level or a week-by-week level, but somebody's pulling you out into the bird's eye view, and you realize that it's a huge wave, and either you can like surf the wave and understand the wave, or you get crushed by it. And that's like how I felt. And the fortunate thing was that at the time of realizing that, I was in San Francisco and I had the opportunity to talk to people who are living in the future, in this bubble of being somewhere where you realize or face things earlier than the rest of the world, at least from the product point of view. And I met the guys of Intercom, a t-shirt I got when I met them. Intercom.io, it's a great product for customer relationship management. And they pointed me to a talk by Clay Christensen, and he wrote the Innovators Dilemma, and he's thinking very deeply about changing markets and how to cope with them. And he has a great talk at Business of Software that I really encourage you to watch. And he talks about thinking about your product not in the sense of who is the competition and who are my customer personas, but only focusing on the job that people are hiring my product for. And to give a more concrete example, or a bit of a context why he thinks that's important, that the interesting thing is that if you nail the definition of the job, you have something you can hold on to that won't change dramatically. It will be something that stays the same for a longer period of time. And one example he gives is that Julius Caesar had a logistical problem of getting information from A to B as fast as it gets, and as fast as it can be done. And that's a job. And the implementation of the job was done by horses. And today the job is done by FedEx, or some people could say it's done by the internet, depending on the context. So the job is still the same, and deeply understanding the job enables you to cope with changing markets. Whereas if you're thinking about competition, or if you're thinking about who your personas are and how old they are and what attributes your customers have, it's harder to actually nail the problem. And that made me realize what that means for the product space. So it's not like 100 different challenges that we face as product people. It's more like one trend that's there. And it's this very simple trend. And the trend is we have shorter release cycles. And release cycles even is the wrong word, because companies like Amazon deploy new code like hundreds or thousand times a day, which is a good example for the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. Not every company does that. But it's definitely going in that direction, and it won't go into the backwards. It will just go into the direction of having shorter release cycles, and so short release cycles that even talking about them as release cycles or thinking about them as release cycles makes no longer sense. And different people have different words or different symptoms or different indicators for that. So the engineering people talk about continuous deployment, continuous integration. The marketing people talk about life cycle management or lifetime marketing. So it's no longer, we need to acquire these people, they need to buy our software, and then we're fine. It's more like building a relationship, nurturing a community, and being in the loop with the customer all the time. The UX guys talk about continuous customer development. It's no longer, we do a focus group every release. You can't do that anymore if you're releasing 100 times a day. So many processes that were time-boxed are no longer time-boxed, they're on a continuous basis. But the persona that's that's most affected by the change is the product manager. Because the product manager is the person that has to tie the whole team together, the different silos, or if you're in a fortunate position, you already have a team that's cross-functional. But by definition, if you're a product manager, you are the cross-functional person in the team. So if you want to make faster releases, you have to get faster decisions by your team. And not even that, you have to have people in your team that don't and identify themselves with certain silos. So you no longer want people who say, I'm an engineer, I don't care about marketing, or I'm a marketer, I don't care about code, or I'm a designer, I don't care about servers. You need to have people who understand every other person that they're working on the product, because they need to get it right without having the Q&A team or the product manager going over it again. Everybody needs to understand what the customer wants and what the trade-offs are. And if you can't do that, you can't get to the fast release cycles. Another thing is, if you look at it from the product manager's position, it used to be the way that technology forces you in certain time boxes. An extreme example is if you are a video game company and you press your software on CD, you have to get it right the first time, you have to ship it to the stores, you can't make changes later. The changes are forced to be months or weeks at least later. Whereas now you have to ship all the time, so the bottleneck no longer is the logistics or the technology, the bottleneck actually is the product team. So that puts a lot of pressure on the product people. But what made me relax again and calm down was the realization that this is just how things will evolve, and we're not actually there yet. We just got a glimpse of the future, because it's not evenly distributed yet. But just knowing that eventually it will be like that, even in the worst performing companies, not only in the best performing companies, is a great thing to understand. And each department and each silo has to understand what that means for them. And the cool thing is that the product people probably are the first ones to actually realize it, or the people who are in engineering but always were interested in design, or the people who are in marketing but always were interested in another space. So everybody who has different skills and interests has the ability to understand or grasp what's going on a bit earlier. And that's what I was very fortunate about, because I thought, okay, I'm in the product position, and I'm really scared because we are actually building stuff for product teams, but just realizing it is a way of seeing patterns. So I no longer have to stay up at night and can't sleep because I don't know any solutions. I can actually think about it in a simple way. It's shorter release cycles, and from that perspective, you can see all the implications that will have. It's not like you can see the future, but at least you can understand what's going on earlier. So the thing that we as a company want to do is to create products, especially for those people who face these challenges, and we believe right now it's just a few, but eventually it will be everyone. And I think it's a really exciting space, and it's not only something that you can't sleep about, it's something that's really interesting, because innovation is accelerating at a pace that we can't even imagine. So it's a very exciting space to be in, and one big ask I have for you is to write yourself an email to remind you that you think about what that means for you individually, what that means for your position, what that means for your company, so you are already prepared and understand patterns like I did, so you don't have to be as scared as I was. And another thing that I would like to announce is that we are actually putting out a lot of content in that direction, and I will be writing a lot of blog posts, and we're also working on a book called Growth Engineering 101, which tries to explain the change and the trends that are happening and what our points of view on that is. And in that context, I'm interviewing very, very great product people like Josh Ellman from Twitter and Facebook, who's with Greylock right now, or Hitan Shah from Kissmetrics, or Nicholas, who has a great product background, really understands the space, and is like one of the prototypical guys that are not only an engineer or only a product manager or only a marketing guy, who have a really holistic view. And I think interviewing these people will help us understand what it means for the future and what we can do about it. So yeah, I'm glad that I can announce that everybody of you will get the book for free, and we can hopefully meet in the future and discuss what that means for every one of us. And yeah, thanks a lot for listening.
Can I kick off with questions?
Yeah.
So you're ahead of the curve, right? And you're addressing this market that only exists in part of the world. You're talking about developing a lot of content. What other ways do you educate the market globally and help them come along on this journey with you? You know, the Bay Area has a lot of companies, but how do we get the rest of the world to join this journey?
Yeah, I think the one interesting or really calming point of view is that since it's a market trend, it will happen anyhow. So it's not something we need to fight for or push forward. It's something that will happen anyhow. The only question is whether we will be part of it or on the side or already retired and we don't have to care about it. Probably won't happen like that. So I think one interesting way to make it accessible for people is the book that we're writing, because the book is actually about growth hacking. And in my point of view, growth hacking is just a label for people who are really interested in marketing, but also understand product and also understand technology, and also understand behavior, design, user experience. That's like the prototypical product manager of the future. And you could name it, like the marketing people would name like growth hacker, but every silo or every department, whatever the background, they have a prototypical future tech lead or marketing lead or design lead who strive for the same attributes. So we see like a convergence of all the silos. And that's something I think the book can make more accessible, because people will like initially not think about I need to be the product guy who knows everything. People will look for certain labels that are interesting. I don't know if that's a really good answer, but I guess it will happen like that. You will be forced, or there will be trends in your own department. So if you're a tech guy, people will talk about we need to be agile, we need to put out faster releases. So we have to understand the customer, so we make user stories. So you're already more in like the position of an engineer who also understands the customer point of view and also understands how the feature you're working on will later be marketed. Whereas earlier you've been just like an engineer. So we see like the trend of what a good engineer or a good UX guy or a good marketer is, and that picture is changing in every department. Yeah.
One question, you mentioned met with quite a lot of product managers, I presume kind of in internet or software companies. Do we have a sort of point of view yet about how this change will affect people outside of that industry?
I think that the people most affected by it will be the consumers, because the consumers will get better products faster, and they will have way, way, way more products to pick from. Maybe to just the shorter release cycles have a lot of implications, but maybe it makes sense to go into why we have shorter release cycles. So the infrastructure from a technical point of view provides us with a platform where we can work on just the product and not having to work on the infrastructure. So we have cloud services. That's the technical point of view. We also have, from a distribution marketing point of view, we no longer have to have $1 million or $1 or billion budgets to go to print or radio or TV. We can have targeted advertisement. We can have retargeting, and it's actually very cheap and already at a level where if you're smart, you only have to pay for it if it makes sense for you, because only if you get the return on investment, it makes sense for you to pour money in, and you already can track it. It's like another platform that we have. I think there's a talk a keynote by Steve Jobs shortly after he joined Apple again, and he was at Next, and one guy asked why people should develop software for macOS, and he had an analogy about different levels of a building, and if you develop for DOS, you start at level 3, and if you're working on Windows, you're starting at level 7, and if you're working on the next platform or on the future macOS, it will be way higher. And we have a team of people who can build or cope with certain complexity, and the levels are a certain complexity. So if you have a level T complexity team, you can start with macOS on level 9 and you get to level 11 of complexity. I think that's an interesting analogy that explains what we're having right now, because we don't have to manage our own servers. The product team doesn't have to do. We don't have to work on the distribution because we have the app stores and we have inbound marketing and we have tons of people who are in the market, and there are more and more people getting into the market. And we don't have to spend as much, lost the thought. Yeah, so we have in each department we are on a level that we haven't been before. So we can iterate faster, we can ship the software faster. Yeah, lost the thought again. Sorry.
Sorry, you go, Ron.
I was going to say, just to add on to your question, I think you talked a lot about how this changes internet stuff. But to me, the question is always, how does that affect hardware design, or if you're working at Boeing designing airplanes, does that change at all? Or you're doing desktop software, making the next release of Windows, does that change?
That's a very interesting question. I'm not sure if I'm the right person to answer that in a good way, but I can at least try. I think if you're looking at the OS space, like at Mac OS or the iOS, you see Apple moving from operating system release cycles that are in the years to monthly releases. And I guess with operating systems, we will see something like a continuous release as well. It's just harder to pull off than with single products.
So I will say in manufacturing and enterprise, and I'm watching these similar trends. It's amazing that we haven't talked about this, but check, right on. So in enterprise manufacturing, they're really involved with innovation, and they're really concerned, and they're tied into their infrastructure that they have in place, which they can't afford to support. So they are looking to startups, they are looking to this whole discussion about innovation and how to take this thinking back into those platforms.
Rapid prototyping.
Yeah. I think also like
prototyping.
So I just had this discussion around innovation and new innovation processes, and what they call R&D, we call iterate. We can throw it out quicker, software. They have to invest in R&D, but those cycles are getting smaller and smaller.
I think like one really interesting space in the manufacturing area is 3D printing. So we've seen some like aerospace companies, instead of going to an actual specific manufacturer for parts of turbines, to going to a general purpose 3D printing company and only having their own R&D people provide the specifications to a general purpose 3D printing company, and they manufacture the parts, and they can do that on a small scale. So you don't have, so you de-risk the manufacturing cost. You don't have to have too many Q&A cycles without actually having the part. You can just go to the 3D printing general purpose company. It's definitely not a space I'm really knowledgeable about.
Thomas, one thing you talk about is the technical aspect, and you get a lot of this stuff for free with the platform or with the infrastructure there, and also with the distribution piece, with the online marketing. Those two pillars, what's another pillar? Do you foresee that there's something else that people are working on today and innovating on today that'll make it easier to deliver products in the future?
Yeah, I think like in the UX and customer development space, we see a lot of products cropping up, and in hindsight, for me, now it makes a lot of sense to see products like Olart or User Voice just getting into the space. Because now, for me, it makes a lot of sense that the products are actually really, really needed and basically like forced into the market. Because you get way, way, way faster feedback from your customers. The tools also like help you manage what the ideas are. It's no longer like a black box that everybody puts a thought in. You have a community that can collaborate on the ideas, or actually like specify and give you screenshots of what they want, and that's a really interesting thing to have. Whereas earlier you would have to assemble a focus group and only do that once a release, so you don't get the continuous feedback. Also the metric space, like companies like Mixpanel, Kissmetrics, Intercom, that enable you to really understand or x-ray your customer base and in which adoption cycle of your product they are and how they behave and what the points are where they churn. Or like if you're in a gaming, like if you're working on Angry Birds or Cut the Rope kind of games, you actually get real-time data on whether people can beat the end boss at level 4 or whether 90% of them go away in frustration. It's like information that you didn't have earlier. That's really exciting as well. So like there are really, really cheap and easy ways to understand how the people are using your products and how to improve on them. And we see that like that improvement of like the pillows that are stacking in every like in every silo. And the interesting thing is another interesting thing that the thought I lost earlier was like if you're looking at it from an investment point of view, you would earlier you would have to put a lot of money into an idea to then see whether it works or not. Now the cost to enter a market is approaching zero. You don't have to acquire servers. You don't have to, at least in the software space, you don't have to acquire servers. You don't have to build a fully fledged out product. You don't have to spend into distribution until you understand whether it worked or not. You can just work on it on a weekend, on a hackathon, and have it distributed immediately and track whether it works or not in a couple of days. So the investment point of view is really interesting because it's no longer like a really risky space. It's actually like you only need to invest in stuff that already works or shows traction. So the investment point of view is totally changed. And that's good for the investors, but that's also good for the entrepreneurs, because the entrepreneurs can wait longer or have more runway until they decide to approach an investor, and then they have something more concrete. And for the general product space, that means that the barrier to entry is as low as ever, and it will get even lower, so there will be more and more competition to get shorter release cycles, to understand faster what your customers need, which is a great change for the consumers. And in hindsight, for me at least, it makes total sense, because it's not like that happened last week. It's happening like since the 90s or since the 80s. But just realizing it from a bird's eye view, that that's what's happening and that it won't go into the other direction again. That's something that made me a lot more comfortable and calmer.
So a follow up on that, I guess you mentioned it's very good for consumers, so it's actually like quite bad for a lot of established companies, particularly the larger ones. So how in this new world do you create some kind of advantage, once you're out of that startup stage?
That's a great question. I think if you look at companies like Twitter or Facebook, and probably a lot of like at Amazon, they are kind of actually not behind the curve, but on the forefront of it, because like Amazon, Google, Twitter, Facebook, they deploy changes like in the minutes. And if you look at or Netflix is another interesting example, or Spotify, if you look at how they're structured internally, they have a lot of teams that are cross-functional. So that's a really small team. Usually they call it like 2 pizza teams, because they have the size that if you order 2 pizzas, everybody gets a slice. So if you have more people than that, you need to split the group up. That's at least the point of view of those companies. And the teams are not like engineering, design, marketing. They're more like small autonomous groups of people that have maybe 1 product guy, 2 designers, 2 engineers, 1 marketer, 1 copywriter, 1 UX guy, and that's a team. And that was not as obvious for me to understand in the beginning, but looking back, it makes a lot of sense, because if you have cross-functional teams, you can move way, way faster. And if you have like the sign-off of the rest of the company that you can make your own decisions and work on an atomic part of your product, then you can move way faster than if you have hand-off processes to other departments. So that's a structural change that we see. And I think we have like the same, it's not like a new concept. So if you look at engineering teams, you have a thing called Scrum, and companies like Nokia for several years practice something called Scrum of Scrum. So you have small teams that are structured in a way that they iterate really fast and are a really small team, and they report to other teams that are a bit higher level, and they also iterate very fast and are small teams, and it looks like a pyramid of autonomous teams. So it's not like it's happening this week or it's happening next week. It's a trend that changes the values of companies, changes the structure of companies, changes the individual roles of everyone who's working on product. Yeah, that's the scary and the.
But that didn't save Nokia.
I think it's a really complex thing. So changing the structure definitely helps a lot, but might not solve all the problems. I think there's also an interesting interview with Steve Jobs at All Things Digital, where they asked him how Apple works, because they have like the secrecy paradigms, not only outside of the company but also inside of the company, and how that works, because it looks like they're not iterating like Facebook or Google, and they look like siloed departments. But I think he gave a really interesting answer and explained that the key people in the company are the ones that are heavily involved in all areas, in all cross-functional areas of the company, and they are heavily, like, since they are involved with hardware, they are very much inspired or influenced by the Toyota way, the lean production methodology. So Apple is actually, if you crack it open, can peek inside, it's actually a company that that is on the forefront of heavy prototyping, going through many iterations on the software side, going through many iterations on the hardware side, involving as many people as you can, with the constraint that some things may not leak outside of the company and may not even leak inside of the company, which is a tough challenge that they set themselves on. But it's actually a company that looks very slow from the outside, like they release a product once a year, but internally they're ticking like a startup.
I want to ask about the sort of early days of Blossom, and you mentioned you were talking. Sorry, you mentioned issue tracking and bug tracking and whatnot. I wanted to know what made you decide to go towards the product side of it more, maybe a product management tool. Like, I'm sure there was something that you thought, no, this is a bigger problem.
Yeah. That's a really great question. So I think that's also something we really understood way later than it actually happened. So the initial motivation, like I said, was working with the issue tracking tools and trying to use the issue tracking tools for product management, because since all of us have an engineering background, but also a design and UX background, and we were always interested in marketing as well. But having to use issue tracking systems for product development puts you in a position where you only have an inbox of really urgent things all the time, and you lose the bigger picture. And also for a product manager's point of view, they always see like a Gantt chart that's 80% completed, because every engineer is working on too many things at the same time, because all of the things are really important. So they have several, like 20 or 30 tickets started to like 90%, and it takes like 90% to get to 90%, and the last 10% are not only 10%, it's like sometimes the same amount of time you have to finish it. So from the product manager's person, it's not really transparent. It looks transparent, and it's like, I think at the Lean Startup conference they called it, they had a screenshot of an Excel sheet. It's like okay, already finished, almost finished, okay. They called it like the success theater. So you set up the company in a way that reporting works from a reporting point of view, but not from how it represents the actual state of the system. And that exactly describes what we've been facing. And from an engineer's point of view, we've tried to be really honest, because from our point of view, the feature was 80% finished. And the only reason why we didn't work on the last percentage of that was that the product manager didn't understand that we were working on 10 things at the same time or 20 things at the same time. And the product manager always said, that's more important, and now this is more important, depending on what the last customer was he was talking to. So it's more like a structural problem, not a people problem, not the problem of the capabilities of the individual teams. And I think it's understandable, because if you look way back, you had releases for like once a year. We release once a year, so you're in stealth mode all the time, and then your main occupation is issue management, because once the release is out, you have issues to work with. But the situation we were in was like we had a marketing opportunity and had to put out a product in 2 weeks, and it had to work. So we had no time for having a product and then having 1 year of issue tracking and getting it right. So that's why the default tool that people used were an issue tracking system, but it no longer fit how the release cycles worked for us. And I think that's just the trend we're seeing right now, moving away from time-box release cycles, no longer even having something that makes sense to call a release because you release all the time.
Can you maybe explain how you solve that? Kanban?
I think, yeah, that's great. Kanban is a concept that's originally coming from the manufacturing world, from Toyota, and a guy called David Anderson brought it into the software development world and understood that the same philosophical concepts of iteration and making the process explicit and transparent also help software teams. So if you look at Greenhopper or our own product, you will have a way to model your process, which usually looks like we have an idea or proposal phase, or then we have a design phase, a UX phase, and we have an implementation or development phase, and then we have a deployment phase, and then it's inside of the product, and then we need to understand whether it works or not. This is like the process the usual process of our software development team, and you just visualize that process for the different stages, and you have cards moving through that process, and each card represents a thing called minimum marketable feature. So each card has a name, like a feature name, and a description why that feature is important, which is an interesting concept because a feature is on the abstraction level that everybody in your product team understands. So that an engineer understands Facebook Connect means I need to understand the API and what that means for me, and a UX guy understands that he needs to look at how other companies implement Facebook Connect, how the internet interaction flow is. A marketing person understands what the benefits for the customer are. It's the right granularity to get the whole team with the different personas on the same page, whereas if it's an issue level or a story level, you would have 5 stories for every person. So you would have a story for the UX guy, a story for the development guy, a story for the marketing guy, and they should work on the same feature and they should visualize where the feature is in the stage, and once it's completed you can ship it. So Kanban is you could do talks and books about Kanban, but like if you haven't heard about it before, I definitely encourage you to look into it. It's a good way to visualize a continuous flow of improvements and not a time box release flow of weeks or months.
So as the rest of the world catches up to where the Bay Area is today, where does the Bay Area go? What's the future of, to go back to your William Gibson quote,
yeah.
The future is now, the future is here. Well,
what's the future for the
what's
future
the future
people?
for here?
Yeah, I don't know. I think if I would, that's something that's really interesting to me, and I try to understand and talk to people who are in the product space and who are like really successful product people. But I like the answer I get from them is basically also that they don't know. It's just a trend that it gets faster and shorter and forces the team to work closer together. So it's like a magnet that pulls the departments out of the departments into teams. So from a team perspective, you become cross-functional, but also from an individual person's perspective, you get cross-functional because you're no longer working as an engineer, you no longer work inside of the engineering department, you work with a team where you constantly interact with all the other people, with marketing, with design, with the product manager. So I think probably we will all move into a direction if we're working on products that we are no longer viewing ourselves as I'm in that silo, but more like it is valued and encouraged to understand all the other departments. Don't know if that makes sense.
So, well, I have another question for that. What does that mean to the individuals working in these companies? What disciplines should we be expert at?
I think you will start to see, and I think you all already see in the Bay Area. There's the term called growth hacker, which basically is a marketing guy who has technical understanding and UX understanding and hopefully a statistics background. That's a job position that is flooding all the the HR markets, HR platforms in the Bay Area, and that's something you don't find in Europe right now. And it will change. But at the same time, if you're zooming in on the engineering department, the best job offerings from a few years back where this is what the company does and this is what your day-to-day will look like, and then you have the list of requirements like buzzword, 20 years of Ruby experience and something like that. And that's also changing. That was already the best job description, but now the job description will include looking for a back-end engineer who understands system operations, but also can do front-end and can also do interaction design and has read about behavioral design. And if you look at how the startups...
You can also develop content.
Yeah, can develop content. That's a great thing. That's a trend I'm seeing is has a blog and has background in technical writing. And that's something that popped up, and that's maybe if you look at elite startups, that's a requirement right now. That's something do you have a blog? Have you contributed to open source software? Things that were nice to have are requirements right now. And I'm probably looking if you look at the valley, looking at the really successful companies, the companies that have to move very fast, the requirements they have are a glimpse into what the whole market will look like.
Who are the companies that are doing it really well today?
You're putting me on the spot. I think Twitter is doing it really, really well. So we had the opportunity during the Seedcamp tour to meet one of their product people, hear Dick Costello talk about the company. And I think the way they understand that their holistic view of what the trend means for the whole company, what it means for the structure in the company, what it means for the individual persons, and what it means for the product managers. I think they really understand the whole thing. And I think Spotify looks like the company that also really gets it. And Netflix might be another interesting example. But it's just what I think, having not worked at the companies. Facebook, Google, great examples.
Or this is what they wanted you to believe in the tours they gave you.
Possibly. Yeah. I think if you're looking at a startup, a small startup that is forced to move faster than everybody else, and it basically has founders and the first few hires, you will see that's a cross-functional team because you have to fill out all of the roles. So they probably have the most stress, most force put on them. So that might also be a great point of look at how the future might look like. But it's not like that. I'm still in the realization and trying to understand what's going on phase. I would be glad to have all the answers.
So what's in your book?
So the book is basically about growth hacking. Growth hacking is a term that describes like the guy that every startup and company wants to hire right now. And that's a cross-functional person that is into marketing, that understands what the customer wants, understands customer development, how to talk to people, how to like talk to people in a like Socratic way, or in a way like a physician would talk to you. It's not like the customer says, I have a headache, I want this, and you're in the job to provide him the medication he asks for, more like understanding what he really means, what the root cause is. So someone who is very empathetic about the customers, but at the same time understands marketing, understands positioning, understands how to leverage technology to build marketing into the product, so to add features that make it easy to for the customers to distribute the product. It's actually a lot of different abilities. He has to understand behavioral design, understand how people use the product, how to trigger them to do certain behaviors, how to get them from I first heard about the product to I'm actually taking a look at the product to I really understand the product, it gives me value early on, I stick with the product, I'm an evangelizer for the product, and I get more people in who understands the whole journey of the customer. So it's a very customer-focused position, I would say, but at the same time to execute on that knowledge, he also has to understand what the engineering team is capable of, has to give concrete directions on where to go, has to understand the metrics and understand what actually is happening, not only what he thinks is happening. So it's a very cross-functional, multidisciplinary position.
Which used to be called product marketing. You just defined product marketing.
Yeah, it's nothing new. It's nothing new. It's just that the skills are needed more than ever. So that's basically a product marketing position, or a product management position, or some people now seek an engineer or someone who was in engineering and switched to marketing, and also at some point in time wanted to study sociology. What's the word?
Sociology.
Sociology. Psychology. History.
So Cindy and I have actually talked about this a number of times. It's Rich Mironov, who was here back in June. He basically chastised me at the time. He said, "You're looking for unicorns. They don't exist."
Yeah.
And it's exactly what Thomas is talking about. You know, you want the engineer that has experience in marketing, that has, you know, I mean, how do you find these people today? They don't exist, right? Or they're hard.
They're really rare. They have interesting life stories usually. They
Right.
started in engineering, they got fed up, they moved to, because they wanted to fulfill like what the customer wanted, not the product management guy. Then they moved into product management. They always were interested in history and culture, and that made them be better at the product management point of view. Then they said, like, you're so good at product management, you understand the customer so well, you should move to marketing, because that's where you can be most valuable to the company. You can still direct the product team, but you actually should sell the product and talk to the customers all the time. So you have like interesting like LinkedIn profiles that are people jumping, or like have a really inconsistent like journey.
Which describes anyone who's been in product management for their career.
Yeah.
Right. But those aren't the people who are getting hired by the lean startups, because they want people right out of school who don't have any direct experience, but they have brain
Who are willing to
potential.
live off of ramen noodles. Yeah.
And or she.
Have you interviewed ProductTalks for the book?
Who?
Is it Chama, the Facebook guy?
Not yet, but we've been to the Growth Hackers conference in Palo Alto, and he was one of the more interesting guys to speak there. So I'm trying to get him as well. He's the guy who led the growth team at Facebook, and that's the team that discovered that having 7 friends inside of Facebook is like a magic number to get you stick around. That's one of the main targets they thought about, how to get people to in their journey through the product, how to get them to the 7 people, to the 7 friends as fast as possible. 10 days, yeah. 7 people in 10 days changed the growth of Facebook more than you could imagine. Yeah.
So just talk about Vic a little bit more, which is fascinating for me because kind of sounds like one of those guys. Like I was a developer, and now in an email with a client, it's like, oh, well, I want you to do 2 days of marketing and 1 day on the engineering side, and I'm really happy to do this. I wasn't like that. I was enjoying development, but not that crazy about it. So it's like I'm loving this. So the book's fascinating for me. What I wanted to ask about the book was, is it for the novice growth hacker, or is it something more to educate the market, or is it?
Great question.
Who is it for?
Yeah, so it's like a 101 book, so it should be really my goal is to make it really accessible to everyone who's interested in different aspects of product. So I think I believe the book itself is all about product. It says growth hacking, which has a connotation about marketing. But actually, if you look into it, it's about understanding all aspects of product. So if you're an engineer or have an engineering background, I think the book will be really interesting. But my goal is to make the book really accessible for design, marketing as well. So my personal goal with the book is that the marketing guy hires the book to get better at marketing and understands that to get better at marketing, he needs to understand engineering and design better. Same for the design people. So the growth hacking label is useful because it's like a term that people are interested in and want to get into without really not yet understanding what it actually means for them. It's not like getting better at marketing. It's more like it's a byproduct. Getting better at marketing is a byproduct of a deeper understanding of all the other aspects of product.
When will the book be available?
Early 2013, so early next year, but we're shipping parts of the product continuously, and like the first interview I made with Des Traynor of Intercom, who pointed me to Clay Christensen. We already did the interview, I just have to transcribe it, and that's the first interview that will be published on the blog as well, so follow the blog and follow us on Twitter. So we will release parts of the book continuously.
So will it be an ebook, or will you have to?
Yes.
An ebook?
Yes. So we will self-publish it initially. Don't know for later, but yeah, want to make it really accessible, not really bureaucratic, or getting it onto the blog, getting it into SlideShare presentations, and getting holistic end product, like a PDF that has everything.
Awesome, and this is a subject matter of the Startup Product Summit in February.
Great.
It's amazing. I mean, bringing people cross-functionally together to talk to startup practitioners. So
it's definitely really, really exciting times, and I think on the one hand we have that extreme of where are the unicorns? There are none, and on the other side, people who always felt that only being in that position kind of never felt right. And I think we will see job opportunities opening up, people switching positions, and that's actually encouraged to not have a consistent job journey. That's something that's really exciting for me as well, because I was always very interested in engineering, but never felt like that's the only thing that's interesting to